Good evening. Welcome to MassDEP's Technical Assistant Grants Informational Meeting. I'm Nancy Fitzpatrick, and I'm joined tonight by my colleague Peggy Shaw. Both Peggy and I work in the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup's Policy and Program Development Group. We are here tonight to share some general information and provide an overview of the Technical Assistance Grant, or TAG program. First, a few items regarding the Zoom platform we are using tonight. If someone could advance the slide. Thanks, Paul. Throughout the course of the presentation, all attendees will be muted except for Peggy and me. Should you have a question during the presentation, please type it into the chat box and we will do our best to answer it at the end of the presentation, where we have allotted additional time for questions and answers. Last, this meeting is being recorded and will subsequently be posted on the MassDEP TAG webpage, along with this PowerPoint presentation. And now I will turn the meeting over to Peggy to get us started.
Great, thank you, Nancy. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this informational meeting about the TAG program. As you probably know, the purpose of this meeting is to discuss the details of the upcoming funding opportunity that's available through the Technical Assistance Grant Program. We will provide some background information about the program and the mission of the program. We'll talk about the available funding. We'll then talk about the eligibility criteria, the who, what, the where, who can apply, what type of projects and activities the grant funding can be used for. And we'll highlight some details, procedures, and other logistics associated with the application and award process. And as Nancy already mentioned, we'll have time at the end of the presentation to answer any questions. What we won't be discussing are details about any cleanup work that is taking place at a particular hazardous waste site. I also want to note that this is just an overview of the TAG program, and we encourage you to visit the TAG webpage for more details. On the slide, you see the link at the bottom of the slide, and that will take you to the TAG webpage. Next slide, please. So technical assistance grants are administered by MassDEP's Waste Site Cleanup Program. As you may know, the Waste Site Cleanup Program is responsible for ensuring timely assessment and cleanup of hazardous waste disposal sites in Massachusetts. And the procedures on how to perform these cleanups are provided in our regulations, the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, or MCP. So when you hear us use that acronym MCP at different points during this presentation, we're referring to the rules that govern the cleanups at hazardous waste sites in Massachusetts. An essential component of the site cleanup process is public involvement, and the MCP outlines the requirements for public notifications of activities and work being conducted at disposal sites. However, many people find it difficult to understand the technical and scientific information contained in the plans and reports related to the cleanup of sites. So in addition to public notification requirements, the MCP also includes specific opportunities, such as offering technical assistance grants, for the public to become more involved in the decision-making process of a disposal site cleanup. So the purpose of TAGs, as it's stated here, is to support effective public involvement during assessment and cleanup of disposal sites. And this is done by providing funding to assist groups in obtaining expert technical assistance to understand and evaluate disposal site activities, and to enhance public education, and public access to information. And just to emphasize, the grant funding is available for these public involvement related activities. It's not intended to fund actual cleanup work at a disposal site. Next slide, please. So a little history on the Technical Assistance Grant Program. TAGs were introduced with the enhanced public involvement procedures that were part of the Waste Site Cleanup Program we designed back in 1993. The first TAG funding round was offered in 1995, and we offered funding rounds for most years between 1995 and 2002. After 2002, the program took a bit of a hiatus. One reason was due to additional changes that were being made to the wayside cleanup program at that time, including to the TAG procedures. We picked it up again in 2007 and offered funding rounds from 2007 to 2010. TAGs have been on hold since 2010. Primarily, this is a reflection of limitations on resources, both staff resources and availability of funding that could be earmarked for this purpose. So we're very happy to be able to bring back TAGs for the fiscal year 2022. Next slide, please. So for this round of funding, the total available funding is anticipated to be $150,000 with individual awards up to $15,000 per applicant group. Next slide, please. In general, groups who have potentially been affected by contamination from an eligible disposal site can apply for TAG funding. More specifically, any of these groups listed here can apply for a TAG. First is groups of individuals such as community groups and neighborhood associations, and in parentheses, we note that existing PIP groups are eligible for TAG funding. And just a quick explanation, not to go into too much detail here because that could be a whole nother webinar, but as some of you are aware, groups can petition to have a disposal site designated as a public involvement plan site or a PIP site. A group that is already established as a so-called PIP group is eligible to apply for a TAG. And these groups are generally good candidates for this type of funding, but a group doesn't need to be a PIP group to be qualified. Also, certain public entities, municipalities, public water districts are eligible to apply for TAG funding. Next slide, please. The primary reason for ineligibility is when a group or a member of the group is responsible in some way for the cleanup at the disposal site. So if they're an owner or operator of the disposal site or are otherwise responsible for conducting or funding assessment or cleanup work at the site, they are not eligible to apply for a TAG. So as an example, if a disposal site is located on a parcel that is owned by a municipality, that municipality may not apply for a TAG for that particular disposal site. There's other more specific examples of ineligibility, and those details can be found on the TAG webpage. Next slide, please. So, excuse me. We'll talk a little bit about the disposal sites that are eligible. Since this is a grant from the state of Massachusetts, I think it goes without saying that the disposal site must be located in Massachusetts. The site must also be actively involved in the assessment and cleanup process. And for the purposes of TAGs, would fall into one of these categories, any of these categories. A site that has been classified as Tier 1 or Tier 2. And just a brief explanation of what that means for those not familiar with our program. Disposal sites that are managed under the Wayside Cleanup Program and MCP requirements are required to tier classify 1 year after coming into our system, or within 1 year after coming into our system. A simple spill that can be cleaned up quickly within 1 year would not be required to tier classify. So when we're talking about tier classified sites, we're referring to more complex sites that have been in the system longer. Also eligible are sites that our program considers to be adequately regulated and being managed under another regulatory program. This includes federal Superfund sites that are on EPA's National Priorities List, and sites that are being managed by another state-run program, such as the RECRA Hazardous Waste Program. Next slide, please. So since we're talking about eligible disposal sites, this is a good opportunity, a good time to mention our online sites database. As some of you are aware already, the Wayside Cleanup Program maintains its disposal site files in an online database that is accessible to the public. And we know some of you are already familiar with how to navigate this web page. But for those who aren't, we want to highlight how the site's database can be useful in obtaining information about a site in your community. And if you decide to apply for a grant, the information available here will be very helpful in completing the grant application. Excuse me. So if you click on the link seen here, you'll open up the page that is displayed in the screenshot. First, I want to direct you to the heading, what you need to know. And you find under there some instructional videos on how to navigate this web page if you're not familiar with it. So to open the database, look under what would you like to do? Next slide, please. Click on waste sites and reportable releases, spills, lookup. Next slide, please. And it brings you to this form. A really convenient feature about this form is you only need to fill in one field in the form to get information. You can fill in more than that, but one will get you information. So if you're looking for information for all the disposal sites in your town, you can enter the name of your town into the city town field, hit search, and it'll bring up a list of all the disposal sites in the town that are in our database. So from there, you can click on each individual disposal site, and you'll be able to access links to documents that have been submitted to DEP for that disposal site. If you have a particular disposal site in mind, you can fill in both the address and the town, and it'll bring up information only for sites at that address. And with that, I will turn it back over to Nancy.
Thanks, Peggy. So now that Peggy's provided us with some information regarding the eligibility requirements for applicant groups and disposal sites, you may be wondering what types of activities are eligible for TAG funding. TAG funds may be used for a variety of activities, such as obtaining expert advice from licensed site professionals, environmental consultants, attorneys, or environmental scientists. For those who may be unfamiliar with the term licensed site professional or LSP, these are environmental professionals who are licensed by the state of Massachusetts to oversee disposal site assessment and cleanup activities under the MCP. Okay, getting back to eligible activities, other activities may include seeking assistance for interpreting technical information and site disposal data, as well as activities that could support public education and involvement during the assessment and cleanup process. Next slide, please. Here we have provided you with a few basic examples of possible TAG projects. In the case of the first example, expert advice could be particularly helpful when dealing with a large, complex disposal site that has many detailed reports and an extensive volume of data that may not be readily understandable for less or non-technical individuals. Projects may also choose to focus more specifically on a key report, as in the second example of hiring a risk assessor to evaluate a risk assessment conclusions with regard to a community's concerns for public health risks. Other projects may place emphasis on public education and outreach, as in the third example, through development of websites and supporting community forums. As Peggy mentioned earlier, for further information on eligibility and additional examples of both eligible and ineligible activities under the TAG program, we strongly recommend you review the TAG website, as well as the more detailed grant opportunity document once it is posted on the webpage, which will be sometime next month. The next slide, please. Before moving into the specifics of the tag application process itself, I'd like to make you aware of the estimated grant timeline and some important dates and deadlines. You'll see that this informational meeting is the first item at the top of the list. The next important date to be aware of is Wednesday, May 19th. This is when the notice of the grant opportunity will be posted on both COMBIZE and the MassDEP tag website. COMBIZE is the online statewide procurement platform for such announcements. Also on Wednesday, May 19th, the more detailed tag grant opportunity and the grant application will be released and posted on the MassDEP tag website. Written questions may be submitted to MassDEP via email until 5 p.m. on Friday, June 11th. Official answers in written form will be provided and published on the MassDEP webpage by Friday, June 25th. A little later in this presentation, Peggy will be providing a little bit more information relative to these question and answer periods. The grant application deadline itself is 5 p.m. on Friday, July 16th, and announcement of grant awards will be posted on COMBIZE and the MassDEP webpage on Friday, August 20th, with an estimated contract start date on Friday, October 1st. Next slide, please. Okay, moving on to the grant application itself. The application is a fillable Word document that may be saved and submitted by email to MassDEP. You'll see this is a screenshot of the first page of the application, and it has various sections that you would move through, starting with applicant information, moving into disposal site information, and then applicant eligibility criteria. Next slide. Now, Peggy's already gone through the eligibility criteria, so I'm going to focus more on the evaluation criteria. The next sections of the application detail the evaluation criteria and allow space for input. This criteria will be used to score and rank the applications by the grant review team, which will include, the grant review team will include MassDEP staff. Projects awarded funding will be those that best address the TAG program goals as reflected in the evaluation criteria. Next slide, please. There are 8 evaluation criteria. The first 2 focus on the severity and complexity of the disposal site and how activities in the proposed project address the site's impact to health, safety, public welfare, and the environment. In this section, the application requires a site narrative that includes information such as the size of the site, its location, types and levels of contaminants in various environmental media, such as soil, groundwater, drinking water, indoor air. Also, the extent of contamination should be described, as well as the risks it poses and the primary exposure concerns at the site. The next criteria, C, speaks to the promotion of public awareness. This criteria looks for activities and strategies that would increase public awareness and an understanding of response actions. Also, items that would provide opportunities for more community engagement and interaction. Next slide, please. Outreach capability. This relates to whether the applicant group can demonstrate the capacity to reach out, communicate with, and involve affected individuals in the community. Criterion E, implementation potential, is intended to determine if the applicant group can implement the proposed project. This could be based on examples of prior success managing similar projects, or otherwise by a strong application that indicates that the group has good leadership and established organization and/or good management skills. The next criteria deals with the project budget and timeline. The application itself includes forms for the estimated project, the estimated project budget and the estimated project timelines. This criterion seeks to determine if the proposed timeline is reasonable and feasible for completion by June 30th, and whether the cost estimates are detailed and credible. Okay. Next slide, please. The last two criteria are more location-based and focus on whether the disposal site falls within certain defined areas. The 21E program supports brownfields redevelopment, and often disposal site cleanup leads to restoring a property and in turn resulting in a greater economic benefit to the surrounding community. Criterion G refers to whether the disposal site is located within a specific economic target area, or ETA, and how the proposed project would benefit the local area economically. ETAs are subsets of economically distressed areas throughout Massachusetts. The TAG application provides a link to the list of EDAs in Massachusetts. We do recommend that you would contact municipal officials in order to determine if your particular site lies within one of these economic target areas. Okay. MassDEP is also committed to advancing equity, diversity, and environmental justice through all key activities. This last criteria focuses specifically on benefits to environmental justice communities and provides a link to these communities. This criterion looks to see if the disposal site is located in an EJ community, and if so, how the project would benefit such community. Next slide. Okay, so what would we consider elements of a successful TAG project, or indications that a project would have a good chance of success? Overall, the project should align with the evaluation criteria to the extent feasible. We realize that every project is not going to meet or apply to each evaluation criteria, so the grant review committee will certainly give consideration to that. The successful project, though, should be focused and have a clearly defined mission and goals. And the applicant group itself should be able to demonstrate the capacity and the ability to manage funding and have leadership and organizational skills to successfully move the project forward. Next slide, please. So this is one last reminder of the key dates for the TAG application process. All application materials will be available for download on May 19th on the MassDEP TAG website. And the deadline for all applications and supporting documents is 5 p.m. on Friday, July 16th. Next slide. And from here, I think I'm turning it back over to Peggy.
Great, thanks, Nancy. The primary focus of this presentation was to provide you with information about the technical assistance grants and details about the application process, but we also wanted to provide some important details about the award procedures if you decide to apply. So first, only one TAG will be awarded per applicant group, and only one tag will be awarded per disposal site. But one award may be used by a group for more than one disposal site. So a scenario where this might be useful is when there are two disposal sites located on a single property. It might make sense for a group to apply for and be awarded funding for tag-related activities at both of those disposal sites. We also wanted to talk about the duration of the funding award. Nancy previously noted that the estimated date that the contracts will be executed and work can begin is in early October. These contracts will run through the end of the state fiscal year, which is June 30th, 2022. So about 9 months. There may be opportunities for contracts to be extended into the next fiscal year, and that is at the discretion of MassDEP. Next slide, please. So if your group is chosen for a tag award, there will be required documents that you'll need to complete. The scope of services agreement is an agreement that the grant recipient has with MassDEP describing the tag specific contract requirements. Also included in this agreement are the proposed itemized budget and the proposed timeline for itemized tasks. We've included a draft template of this document in the grant opportunity, and you can take a look at that in a few weeks when the opportunity and application are posted. The other documents listed here are the state contracting standard forms, and these are available on the state comptroller's webpage, and we'll also include links to each of these forms with the grant opportunity. Next slide, please. So just a couple words about the award payment. This grant award works on a reimbursement basis. So in other words, if you are chosen for a grant, you will not receive the award in a lump sum. Rather, the funding will be distributed as you incur cost. And this is for expenses that are incurred after the funding is awarded. So only expenses that are incurred during the duration of the contract will be eligible for reimbursement. The next two bullets are just an FYI for groups that are just beginning to organize themselves. Groups receiving awards must have legal authority to receive, disperse, and be responsible for funds. This requires applying to be recognized by the Massachusetts Secretary of State. And for your convenience, we've included a link to the Secretary of State's webpage where you can find information on how to go about applying for the status. And it's important to note that this process does not need to be completed before applying for a tag, but it will need to be completed before funding is awarded. Also, in order to receive grant funds, the group will need a taxpayer ID number. Information on how to obtain this number is available on the IRS webpage. And again, this is not required before applying for a tag, but it will be necessary in order to request reimbursement of expenses if a grant is awarded. Next slide, please. Next slide. Is the slide up?
I wonder if Paul is frozen.
Oh. Well, I can just talk about it.
If you go ahead, Peggy, I can pull up the rest of the presentation.
Okay, hold on. No,
here it is. Okay.
No, I was muted and it was hidden. Are you seeing the Francis Gavin webpage?
Oh, no, we aren't.
Oh, okay. I think I inadvertently hit that. Award payment. Are you seeing the award payment details page?
Yep, we can go to the next one.
Okay. I think I inadvertently
Excellent.
linked.
Here
Sorry.
we are. Okay, just a word about communication during the application process. One of the reasons we like to have these pre-grant announcement meetings is to get as much information out to as we can to potential applicants. As you've already heard, the grant opportunity and application are scheduled to be made available on May 19th. Until then, we can speak with you directly and freely about the process, and we can discuss potential projects you may be considering. Once the application goes live on the 19th, we really can't talk to you at all. The process becomes more formal, and any questions you have must be submitted to us in writing, and we will respond in an official, I guess, answer document that will be posted on the TAG webpage by June 25th. So we really encourage folks to get in touch with us with any questions sooner than later. Next slide, please. So this is the end of the presentation, and we can now answer any questions you have. But if you have a question that doesn't get answered tonight, or you come up with another question, please feel free to reach out to either Nancy or I. Next slide.
Okay, questions. I have some questions from the chat. One from Kevin Trainer, and I inadvertently answered this to somebody else, but is DEP or DOR reviewing the reimbursement claims? Did you hear me?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
that I actually I don't know that detail. I assume that DEP does it.
Yes, I believe DEP is, DOR is not involved in,
Right.
in
Okay.
this. So DEP is reviewing it. I think this may be a just association with some other reimbursements that are run through DOR, that, but this is strictly within DEP.
Right.
Another question is just kind of if you could go back to the just to review again the points that make for a good application. If you could just briefly go over them again, or just put them up on screen. And these will be available, the slides will be available online, and the recording will be available online. But Peggy, just give you a briefly go back to those. Oh, I have to go back to those, don't I?
That was just it.
Elements of successful tag.
Yep, there you go. So project proposals that that align with the evaluation criteria to the extent feasible. You'll see in the application is very detailed, and it and the TAG grant opportunity document provide a lot more descriptive information and details regarding the criteria. So I think it'll be a little helpful when you can see that. But it's important that a project has a good focus and a clear mission statement and goals. We realize that these projects will be going on in maybe an abbreviated time frame. So it's important to know what you're doing and to get the project and get things done and move the project along. To the extent that you're able to do it. You know, we realize that sometimes, you know, activities stop at disposal sites, so that's beyond your control. But and then the last one is the applicant group. The applicant group is well organized, has good leadership, and has managerial skills, and has the ability to manage the funds, manage the budget, the flow of funds, so that the project can move ahead smoothly.
Okay. We have a rather long question, so bear with me while I read it. So a little bit of background. This is about the kind of in general about the WR Grace site in Cambridge that was Tier 1C. It's currently closed with an AUL, but with an ongoing PIP beyond the RAO, because the significant asbestos in the soil is left in the ground and with an AUL not to disturb it. a 501c3 neighborhood group had previously received 3 tag grants during the phase 2 and phase 3 assessment. The site was bought last year and is scheduled for major site development. Would this be eligible for things like split sample testing before the development and for community outreach, particularly looking for translations into the 6 languages spoken in the neighborhood, in the public housing units across the street from the site? And to put it, I guess, including a more specific question that I would add, there may be some sites that have an RAO, but maybe doing some post-RAO work as well to broaden it. So would the tag grants be available for those kinds of sites?
I'm not familiar with the details of that site,
Yeah.
but in the sites that have reached a permanent solution or other completion of the cleanup would not be qualified. But doing post-RAO work, if the site's not tier classified, then it's at least according to our regulations, it would not qualify for a tag grant.
I think, and I don't know, I don't offhand know the answer to this either, and we can find out and give a more a specific answer. But for a site like this one, and there are probably many more out there, where it had been tier classified and will be doing additional post-RAO work, possibly using a RAM or more kind of, or they may be coming back into the MCP. Kind of, it would be good for DEP to have clarification on the eligibility of those types of sites, particularly since the last rounds of tags we've provided additional regulation and structure on post-RAO work.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think this is potentially a gray area because the tag regs do draw a line around sites that have achieved a permanent solution. But if I think there's a legitimate question there where there's substantial post-permanent solution work going on that wasn't really anticipated by that regulation.
So good question, and we will come up with a more specific answer to that will be posted on the tag webpage. Okay. With a 9-month time frame, can an applicant apply for less than $15,000?
Yes.
Yes.
It's up to $15,000. You can apply for $5,000.
And if the site already received financial assistance from other sources, federal sources, for example, is the same site eligible for tag grants?
It is. I'm trying to recall the exact ruling on that. You have to you can use funding from different sources, but it can't exceed the total cost of activities. So I'm not explaining this very well. But yes, you can apply for a tag grant if you have other sources.
The fact that you have a grant or some other money from another source does not preclude somebody from applying for this.
No.
It just has to be separate work, and it clearly has to be a link to how people are spending this money as opposed to how they are spending the other money.
Yeah. And one additional note on that is you may also want to check with that other source of funding because they may have limitations on your seeking additional funding. I think I heard something like that related to EPA grant money. So you'd want to check on your existing source of funding.
Yeah.
I mean, when it comes down to, I think simply, we don't, we would not want to be in the position where DEP's money and say EPA's money are both paying for essentially the same thing, and it's a case of double dipping. We just want to make sure that the funds are separate, and everybody is getting kind of what they're providing the money for. Can multiple projects be included under a single grant? For example, community outreach activities, a website to encourage participation, as well as an environmental consultant to interpret data.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Okay. Can you explain how the grant process would work if two PIP groups for two eligible sites in one community if there are two PIP groups for two eligible sites in one community, should the applications be separate or together?
Are they two? Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Nancy.
I just asked if they're two separate sites because you can only get one tag grant for one site. So two groups can't get a tag grant for the same site. They'd have to be separate sites. Now you go ahead, Peggy, and say.
I was going to say the same thing. And if they wanted to have both wanted a tag grant for that one site, then they could join forces and apply together, maybe. But that we can only give one grant per disposal site.
I think one thing that I don't know if this is a clarification, but there's not a limitation on how many grants go to a particular community. So if a city has five applications for 5 different sites with 5 different groups, and they're all good applications and they all qualify, then we would give out 5 separate grants. The fact that the sites are in a one community does not make a difference, but we only want one group per site and one grant per site. Quick question, what is a PIP group?
So a PIP group is another aspect of our public involvement regulations is the ability for groups of 10 or more citizens in a community to petition to have a disposal site designated as a public involvement plan site or a PIP site. Basically, what happens when a site is designated as a PIP site, the person who's conducting response actions, they have to develop a PIP plan, a public involvement plan, and that's basically an agreement between them and the public on how they're going to convey information about what's going on at the site to the public and how the public can comment on activities that are taking place at the site. So it's another mechanism in addition to technical assistance grants where the public can be involved in the decision-making process at a site cleanup. And I also want to point out on our webpage, we do have a public involvement plan guidance. It's a little outdated, but there are some really good fact sheets that explain what a PIP site is. So if you wanted to check that out, that might be helpful. So I don't know if anybody else at DEP wants to step in and say anything in addition to that.
No, I think that was a good explanation. One of the things that you had highlighted in the presentation, that if there's a group out there already that's a public involvement plan, there's an existing PIP group for a site, those groups tend to make good applicants for these grants because they're already focused on a particular site and they have some existing organization. So these grants in that sense are kind of ready-made for PIP groups.
But to underline the fact that somebody mentioned earlier, you do not have to be part of a PIP group to apply for these grants.
Yes.
Correct.
And it doesn't give you, there is no criteria that is specific to being a PIP group either, but PIP groups lend themselves to this because they're already organized.
That's all I have in the chat for questions. Good. We could open up the audio if people have any questions to ask verbally, or if not, continue with the chat. Or do the panelists have anything more you want to cover? Oh, a question. Do you have to be a nonprofit group?
No.
Well, I think kind of by default, you would be a nonprofit group.
So, but there's no specific.
No, there's no specific requirement, but I think generally these, the community groups are nonprofit groups. They're not corporations. So,
Yeah, but a
It's a
municipality,
nonprofit.
I don't know, would necessarily be considered nonprofit.
right, no, municipality is just another, it's a public entity.
Right.
So,
Municipalities are rarely for-profit.
right.
True.
True story.
Okay, that seems to be the end of the chat questions. So would you like to wrap it up, or wait to see if anybody thinks of anything else they'd like to ask?
I would just encourage people to check out the TAG website, and when those documents are posted on May 19th, I think they're very helpful. There's a lot of good detail and explanations.
Yeah, and again, just want to emphasize that if you have any questions, reach out to us before May 19th if you want to talk to us directly.
Yeah.
Oops.
I would say, given COVID and some of the challenges here, email might be my preferred way to get questions.
And just make sure you catch the email addresses.
Paul, are you able to unmute everyone to see if there are any additional questions, or you just?
I can. Let me figure out how to do that. Give me a second. Okay, participants now have the ability to unmute yourselves. So if you would like to ask a question without typing in the chat, or make any other comments, feel free to unmute yourself.
Hey, Paul, it's Carol. I just thought of one other thing, which is you don't have to go through Combis in order to either download the grant or submit it, correct?
No, it's all through the DEP webpage. The only thing going on Combis is a notification of the opportunity in the application, and it's just going to direct you to the MassDEP webpage. So so it's all through MassDEP.
Okay, great. Thanks.
When will this slide deck be posted?
I actually will I'll post it tonight.
Oh, okay. I just want to share it with some CBOs who aren't on the call.
I'll do that after the meeting, and the video from this will be posted a little bit later, probably in a day or two.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Dave Diamond. I did join late, but I wanted to thank you very much for the outreach and opportunity here. I'm a member of the Buckley and Mann PIP, which is very well organized and has been at this for quite a while. I just also wanted to thank the DEP and the EPA for all the support we've received so far, and for having the PIP process in place for us. And so thanks very much for your time, and very interested in the initiatives.
Well, thank you.
Okay, well, it seems that we may have no further questions going on. And if that's the case, I just want to thank you all for joining us. And as Peggy and Nancy said, please reach out to them if you have additional questions, and reach out with specific questions about projects. You can discuss those with them before the official question and answer period opens. So we would encourage you to do that, and we really appreciate your interest in being with us tonight. We hope you all have a very nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night,
Thank you.
everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.